have four esteemed panelists with us today. So thrilled to have a chance to introduce them. We have Colleen Kavanagh from Zego Foods. We have Amit Hooda from Sector 6 and Heavenly Organics. We have GT Dave from GT Synergy Kombucha and Nancy Astarae Metcalf from Dr. Bronners. I would love for you all to hear an introduction from each of our panelists so that they can tell you about themselves, their organizations, and things they are doing to advance this regenerative movement that we've all decided to be part of. So, Colleen, would you mind starting us out?
Sure, I'm happy to. So I came up with the idea for Zego because I had spent 20 years working in politics and nonprofit to try to improve nutrition for low-income kids. And it was a brown rice Krispy treat that actually spurred me to start Zego. We had worked for almost a decade to have new nutrition standards for schools, for public schools, for their snack bar foods. And the first item that Big Food came out with after we passed the new regulations was a brown rice Krispy treat, which, as you can imagine, was not what we actually intended for them to do. So I realized that we could never write the laws tight enough or do enough nonprofit action to actually move the needle, because the problem, it was so systemic to our world. The problem of toxicity, it wasn't just about, can we give a low-income kid one organic apple a week? We need to clean up the entire food system. And the biggest change maker in our marketplace is consumer demand. So we saw it with trans fats, where everyone was eating butter, then everybody ate trans fats, then on a dime, we all switched back to butter. And the entire industry retooled itself. So I moved from my grassroots experience in the nonprofit world and went to leverage grassroots as a company. So Zego is a purity verified brand, and we provide nourishing foods that are accessible to most everyone in the marketplace. So regardless of your dietary restriction, if you have severe allergies or gluten intolerance, if you're diabetic, Zego's foods are designed to meet all of your needs. And in the long term as well, we test for over 400 different pesticides, herbicides, and heavy metals. And we actually post the results for you to see through our packaging. So through every package, and hopefully you guys can see this a little bit, we have a QR code that you can trace, and it takes you to our website where you can see all of our test results. So when we say that we're glyphosate free, you can actually see the test result from the lab that verifies that there's no measurable glyphosate in our products. Now, the reason that we do this is that years ago, I tested my products for glyphosate in 2016 and working with the Detox Project, and we were shocked to find that our organic cinnamon was chock full of glyphosate, as much as you would expect to see in GMO soy products. So we test all of our organic products and our conventional products. And we are working to inspire changes in the food system by having consumers ask other brands to do the same. We think every brand is either an unwitting or knowing conduit for these toxins that are coming from the farms and from the waterways and delivering them to the table. So it is the brand's responsibility to be the detective. The nonprofit can be the journalist and talk about the problem and show some test results, but only the brand can actually get to what's happening at the farm by asking for transparency from their farms and providing it to their consumers. So we are actually proposing that we move towards what is basically a nutrition panel, but it's a purity panel that would be easily understandable by the consumer. You could look at it as quickly as you do a nutrition panel to decide, what type of product do I want? What type of toxins am I willing to put into my body? Because we want to change the paradigm that so that consumers have a right to know if there is potentially toxic residue in the food that they're purchasing, which they do not have the right to know now. So we are looking for more partners to do this type of purity testing. We both are delivering the solution and we're doing the advocacy to try to change the entire system so that we can rapidly clean up this world in the next 5 to 10 years by leveraging consumer demand.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Amit, how about you're next?
Hi. Well, thanks for inviting me here. And Colleen, I agree with everything you said. My name is Amit Hooda, and I think, like Tracy was saying, she was showing the birth and the death cycle. And we are here to discuss, the third biggest inflection point in our life, which is our purpose. So my purpose is to eliminate poverty for farmers and teachers. And although I was born in conflict, I was raised by an agronomist with regenerative values. And I was raised on meditation and farm food. So that's why we have tried to solve problems for farmers. And just like Colleen is solving these problems, I'm solving problems for people in conflict areas. I think we just kind of need to work together and find a regenerative scorecard for all of us and see how that applies to different areas and different fields. We started with Heavenly Organics, which creates supply chain for people in conflict zone. And best way to create peace and prosperity is to give somebody an ethical job. Let them apply a skill they have, because you can't retrain somebody who's grown up. And the way we did it was very simply, if honey is a commodity, if the honey prices goes down, we don't punish our farmers. Fair trade allows you to punish your farmers. We will take that margin cut with them, because that's what is missing from all the organic regenerative industry, is that when a coffee price goes down and up, who pays the price? Really, the farmer. Because all you have to do is pay premium, 20% premium above the floor price. And at times that doesn't cover the cost of farmers' operations. So these are some of the things we are focusing on, is how to build businesses so that we are all a stakeholder. And living regenerative doesn't just mean, a farming. Regenerative is a mindset. It applies to us every day. It applies to our kids. Like when we are a group of 5 friends, what do we take from our friends? What do we give back in relationships? This is where it all starts. And I think regenerative just goes beyond. It's really a way of life. And I think same thing with Sector 6. We started addressing problems around Sector 6 because fashion is the biggest polluter, in my opinion. It damages us psychologically. It encourages slavery, and it pretty much destroys a lot of cotton farmers across the globe. So we are holding ourselves accountable to a certain scorecard. You can read about it on our website, and hoping that more people will join and hold the fashion industry accountable. Because, just to give you an example, even when we used to work in South America, Colombia, parts where the FARC rebels are, we had to get permission from high-level drug dealers to go in there. And people risk their lives. And what do they spend their money on? Gucci, Prada, Ferrari. And it's just a religion without a soul. So let's make fashion regenerative. That's pretty much, our mission for next 2-3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit. And what Amit didn't mention is that Sector 6 was actually featured in the New York Times today in an article about regenerative practices in agriculture in the fashion industry. So that was really cool to see. All right, GT.
Yes, hello, everybody, and hello, Tracy. Thank you, first of all, for including me in this wonderful conversation. I'm honored to be among such incredible minds with such beautiful hearts. My name is GT Dave. I'm the CEO and founder of GT Living Foods. We are the category leader and arguably the category creator of kombucha, which, if you haven't heard about kombucha, it's a beautiful fermented tea that originated thousands of years ago, as recent or as late as 221 BC. I came across kombucha when I was barely a teenager in the mid-90s, when my parents were making and drinking kombucha. And one of the many things that impressed me about kombucha was not only its health properties, but in many ways, I was witnessing the cycle of life, which I think is the underlying definition of being regenerative, is that you can't have life without death and you can't have death without life. But the most important critical detail is that there is no stagnation. So with kombucha, it is no exception. It's this constant proliferation of life, similar to a plant, where it is cultivated with a probiotic culture called a kombucha culture. And it essentially continues to cycle where every time you make a batch of kombucha, it gives birth to an offspring. Very similar to a fruit containing a seed that then can plant another tree or form of plant life. We use kombucha in many ways as a conversation starter, because in my mind, I firmly believe that the most important thing on this planet is life. It's clearly what makes this beautiful blue planet so sacred, but unfortunately, many times it's overlooked. And so what we believe is our opportunity and our purpose is to, through our products and through the education and awareness of why these products are good for you and why you need them for your own personal health, but it's also leaning into the conversation that life is the most important thing. And not only life within our bodies, our digestive systems, our microflora and microbiome, but also life around us. And understanding that every single form of life is incredibly sacred, from the microbiology or the microorganisms that are in fermented foods such as kombucha, to seeds, to insects, to plants, to animals. I think we all need to understand that we are not visitors of this planet. We are citizens, and this is our home, and we need to treat it as such. So through this conversation and emphasis on life, we have created many conversations. One that I'm most proud of is a product that we launched last year in honor of our 25th anniversary called Sacred Life. And the reason why Sacred Life is important is that it really kind of deconstructs this conversation of what is the genesis of life, and how, if we understand, how does that connect all of us? Because I think through that connection, we understand that we are all connected not only to each other, but also to this planet. And if we truly want to save ourselves, we must protect this planet. And so through this Sacred Life, we created this bottle that was not only embossed with sacred geometry, which, as many of you may know, sacred geometry is this conversation of the beginning of every form of life. And every form of life essentially starts off the same, which I think is a beautiful thing. But in addition to that, we utilize organic blue spirulina as this bright blue quality to really enhance the liquid of this kombucha, as a reminder that one of the most sacred things on this planet, of course, is our ocean. And unfortunately, it's frequently overlooked and abused. And I think we all need to have a sense of urgency. At GTs, we have recently developed the mantra of there is no time, the time is now. And what I believe is that the planet is sick. And in many ways, and I hate to say that, we have become a little bit of a parasite. So we have to understand our role in this equation. And again, is the quicker we understand our responsibility as citizens of this planet, I think the world will slowly come to life in many ways that we even witnessed at the early beginnings of COVID when we all retreated to our homes. Nature quickly came back to life. Similar to what you illustrated, Tracy, with allowing that soil to be left alone for a couple of years. Nature has a master plan, and nature really is the world's greatest healer. So the quicker we recognize that, the better we will be.
Thanks, GT. All righty. And last but not least, Nancy.
Thank you so much for inviting me into this conversation. It's deeply inspiring to be engaging with individuals who so deeply care about the planet and living our lives in a way that contributes instead of detracts from all life on this earth. I was drawn to work with Dr. Bronners many years ago. I joined the company in 2014. And what really excited me about Dr. Bronners was that the current generation of family that owns and operates the company continues to live forth their grandfather, Emanuel Bronners' legacy of working and using a soap manufacturing business to unite spaceship Earth. And this was born out of Emanuel's tragic loss of his parents in the Holocaust. And instead of having this rage come up from within, which that would be a very natural reaction, Emanuel Bronners' response was to look at how can, we might say today, regenerate relationships so this type of tragedy never happens again. And the way in which David and Mike Bronner and their family has utilized their grandfather's message in the current business practices of Dr. Bronners really looks at how do we take care of people and planet, not only in our immediate family and communities, but tracing the line of how we source our products all the way back to the farm and the land and communities from where those ingredients come from. So in the early 2000s, that initially looked like, how do we source all of our ingredients as both organic and fair trade? And when the company was not able to find a reliable source of both organic and fair trade ingredients for our major raw materials, the company set out to actually build those supply chains ourselves. And our VP of Special Operations, Gara Leson, just published a book called Honor Thy Label that tells all about those sourcing stories and how to really build an organic, fair trade, and now regenerative supply chain from the ground up. And as we began to witness that while organic has so many crucial elements to it that are helping protect our planet from exposure to toxic pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers, it's not going far enough to truly regenerate the soils from where our materials are grown. So a number of years ago, I think this was back in 2016, David Bronner began to partner with the Rodale Institute, with Patagonia, and others like Fair World Project, Compassion in World Farming, to really identify how can we go beyond organic and not only work to replenish our soil, prevent our soils from being exposed to toxic chemicals, but how do we also regenerate the relationships that we have with people, with animals? And I think this also speaks, Tracy, to your slam where you're talking about regeneration is really a full ecosystem, and we are part of that ecosystem as well. And the farmers that are growing our materials are part of this beautiful community that we have at all levels of earth, plants, animals, people, spirit. So that's really why I feel so honored to be working with Dr. Bronners today, to be carrying this message forward, not only working to ensure our supply chains are organic, fair trade, and regenerative, but that we're able to tell evocative stories to our customers and the community at large as to why this is such a critical focus for how to move forward in the world together.
Thank you, Nancy. That's a perfect segue to my first question, and I will pose this to the entire panel because I'd love to hear from each or any of you who would like to chime in. So this word regenerative that we're all using today, it's a vessel and it can be filled with meaning, and your stories today fill it with the meaning that is bringing forward a philosophy. And in the past, we've seen words be rallied around and they get filled with maybe a different meaning than those who started using it. I think of a word like sustainable. And I have a few parts to this question. So that's the overarching topic. One, what should be the key tenets of regenerative, or should we use the word should? That's a bit prescriptive. Should there be a certification or some standardization or not? Could there be unintended consequences, or could it be more of a safe haven? So any of you who'd like to chime in on what regenerative means to you, the key tenets, should it be standardized? Please unmute and start speaking if you'd like to answer first.
I'm happy to speak to that. So again, this is Colleen with Zego. And this is one of the things that I worked on a lot when I worked on Capitol Hill, is how do you go about setting rules that people will not get around once you get out into a really big marketplace. And what I come down to for Zego and my theory on public policy in general is that we have to have transparency and we have to have metrics. And if we have those two, there's lots of different ways that you can define regenerative, but really the point is the food that's being produced clean? Is the soil clean? Or is the water clean? Are the animals being taken care of? Is the grass being taken care of? These are the things that we want to be done. The result of all of these good things should be that we have food that is measurably clean that's coming out of those farms. So the transparency piece of it is what's missing in something like when you look at like gluten-free verification. So in that certification world, you actually do have to show some data, but you can average your lots, which a lot of people don't know, which means that I could hide a lot that has 50 parts per million, even though the standard is under 20, because I can average it with all the others. So when you look at a situation like that, you're going to look at other certifications. How do people get around it? They average their lot. So if we say, okay, you can use an average that you have to publish that the whole marketplace can see, the consumer can see, you also have to say what your upper limit is of what you measured. So people should be able to know not just what your average was, but what was the highest level that you measured as well. So I kind of joke around and I say, like, I love meeting the farmer. I love knowing more about the farmer. But as a consumer, I don't know if that guy's an actor, and I don't know if he's an asshole. So, he may be a really good friend with Monsanto, but I don't know that. All I know is the food that's coming to me clean. And as a consumer, I feel like Zego tries to speak from the consumer's perspective. That's what they're expecting. If they find out that regenerative is a core study, and I heard Dr. Zach Bush talking about this, that some of the farmers he talked to wanted it to be like a certification that you had attended a course on regenerative agriculture. I think that's a disaster unless you have a metric that goes with it to prove that the result of what you wanted is actually happening. Clean soil, clean food, and transparency.
Okay, so we have quite a distinctive answer here. Measurable, yes to certification, and I'm hearing outcome based. Who else has an opinion?
So I would say I don't necessarily think we have to have certification. It's about the metrics. So okay. I'll just toss that out there.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely contribute my point of view, and I think unfortunately, everything in this country, as soon as it becomes popular, it unfortunately gets exploited. So I think in order to avoid that and prevent that, I think clear definitions are very important. We could talk for hours about what that could be, so I won't open up that box. But I think, again, definitions, and as well, also, and I agree with you, Colleen, but I think there is a little degree there that there has to be an aspect of encouragement. So I think encouragement, because again, if the standards are too high or if the standards start feeling too strong like legal language, it could potentially discourage people and intimidate them. Not to say that we should be relaxing standards, but I think there's a hand-in-hand relationship between education and kind of enforcement, if you will. I think the conversation of certification is certainly interesting. I know that it can be very complicated and hard to enforce and maintain, but I think if we can discover a way to do that economically, that would be probably the best. But prior to that, I really think it's awareness. It's awareness and really clear definitions that are established early on to avoid what we have seen in other worlds of like all natural or even gluten-free or things of that nature.
Thank you.
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
So I think that question of how do we protect the term, the meaning and the teeth in the term regenerative, and also the question regarding certifications really go hand in hand. I think organic and non-GMO as contrasted to sustainable and natural is a really prime example. Because when you have a certification that's laying the standard and the framework for how something is defined, then that not only keeps the integrity of what that definition is, as opposed to it slipping into a meaningless marketing term, but it also provides an opportunity to quickly and easily convey to a consumer in just a single image or symbol that there's all of this weight and meaning behind that symbol, assuming that a certification has full integrity behind it. You know, I think can be a challenge in the fair trade movement, where there's many different types of certifications, and those various fair trade certifications have a different weight and a different integrity to them in terms of how farmers at the ground level are or are not represented. So I agree wholeheartedly with GT Dave here that, you know, we need to have set definitions of what these terms mean, and we need to somehow be able to back that up in a way that is structured and regulated, particularly by third parties, so that we don't have individuals that are potentially making claims, doing well, but not necessarily having as deep of a meaning or practice in what they're doing, or potentially even bad actors that just want to use the term in a marketing way and aren't actually living up to the practices, or Colleen, like you're saying, certain ways that people might bend the rules and regulations to their advantage, and then you're getting a batch that is contaminated with pesticides or what have you. So I'll yield it there, but thanks.
Yeah. Tracy, I would like to say something. That's okay.
Please.
Yeah. So I think it's all, a farmer never wants to use anything they don't have to. So, and a farmer will never waste anything, you know. So the point is, if a farmer is getting paid a lot of money to be regenerative and it's profitable for them, they're going to become regenerative on their own, with or without certification. Like, take an example. We were in the forest in India. We're asking them, don't chop that tree, don't use smoke anymore, which is the easiest way to collect honey. But can we tell them, like, don't do it for the sake of Mother Nature? No. We have to tell them, like, hey, this is how you're going to make the most money. If you cut that tree down, the bee is not going to migrate here next year, because the bees migrate like, you know, the birds. So they want to go back to the same tree and make the same hives every year. So once we showed them, mark this tree 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 like this, and you climb this tree, you get more honey this way. When we showed them all of that, we are basically still tribal people. We are human. So what drives us most is greed. And so regenerative certification, this, that, or the other, like I said, we take the lazy path as organic industry. When commodity price we think is going down, we push onto the farmer. We never try to say, okay, how can I make my supply chain smarter? There is tech, there is AI. So I think if we start leaning into AI and the knowledge of forest and start making these relationships, we'll come with smarter solutions. Certification is, I mean, there is tons of certification. I think a lot of organic is still bogus. So the point is, you know, when I started this honey collection, we'll get rocks, you know, because we'll pay them by weight. We'll get rocks, we'll get sugar. Today, everybody wants to work with us because we showed them an easy, quickest way to make money and be regenerative. So we just have to, like, I think we have to work on making regenerative really economically viable by using tech, AI, and putting our minds together, and not burden the farmer to solve their problems and leave value step there. Because even organic, certified organic coffee farmer can't break even at times. But coffee companies, they make all kinds of money. So who's at fault here? Them or us?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that one of the things that all of us have talked about is there has to be an incentive structure in the marketplace for farmers to do better. It shouldn't be organic or not organic, right? We need encouragement at every level going up. So imagine you have 10 levels heading from conventional up to organic. If we had full transparency, if I as a brand, when I went out to buy my ingredients, could say, I only accept products that are levels 7 through 10. I want the cleanest products, but they don't have to be quite organic. Or craft food might come in and say, I'll take stuff that's level 4, 2, 3, 4, right? So then the farmer can actually change their price depending on how clean their product is, how good their farming techniques are in producing clean food. And so we will be compensating them, and they'll be able to calculate, okay, if I go that extra step and now I've actually pulled the heavy metals out of my soil, I can charge X% more. So that's what we're really aiming for with the transparency, is to provide the market incentive for the farmers and give brands more control over what residue is on the food that they're bringing to their customers.
Yeah, it's not just charging more. Like, for example, in India, when they were setting up dairy farms, Nestle way of doing was bring the Jersey cow, gives the most milk, but it also requires most input. But this Indian indigenous cow will give you half the milk, but it uses 1/10 of the input. So all this information has to be brought together to a farmer in a concise way, because there is all these knowledge gaps, right? A veterinarian is not a dairy farmer. And a business person who's analyzing Nestle's stuff, saying, okay, what the farm should look like, is no clue about the real cost of inputs. So we gotta be very close. Everybody has to get closer to each other in terms of communication and sharing the knowledge base, as well. It's not just one or the other. We work with numerous farmers, and, they are the most hardworking, loyal people in the world. Anyway.
No, I appreciate that there are diverse voices here. And, one of the tenets that's discussed a lot is climate change, carbon sequestration, something that is perhaps measurable in terms of, getting the carbon into the soil and out of the atmosphere. So kind of taking this theme of, what gets outwardly communicated to consumers about regenerative. I want to switch gears a little bit. As all of you commercialize brands and products out in the world, and so you hear back from the market, you hear from your buyers and from consumers. And what are you hearing from people when you use a word like regenerative? Are you getting people excited? Are they connecting anything to soil health or carbon? Are people scratching their head? Like, give us all a sense of where the marketplace is at from your perspective when you incorporate regenerative language into your messaging.
Yeah, I can open with that. In partnership with Patagonia, and specifically Patagonia Provisions and the Regenerative Organic Alliance, a couple years back, we were doing a bit of a think tank on how to bring regenerative and education around regenerative organic agriculture to customers and the general public at large. And we ran some case studies, and also in asking our own friends and family, hey, we're putting this regenerative organic certification forward, this is what it's about, what do you think? And unfortunately, the term regenerative currently, it challenges people. We found that some people don't even know how to pronounce it on the first go. And so I think there needs to be an enormous amount of education around what this is and why people should care. And as Dr. Bronners has put education into the world in the form of video content, social media content, blogs, and so forth, we do receive really positive feedback from our customers who appreciate the depth at which we care and are evaluating our own supply chains to ensure that we're returning nutrients to the soil, that we're covering the soil so it's not eroding, that we're taking care of the relationships within our partnerships of producers and farmers and so forth. So we do receive that great feedback. And I'm thinking back to like the 80s and 90s with all of the education around recycling and Captain Planet and these things. And so I feel like we need to, if we're going to be successful with caring for our shared planet Earth, we need to not only be looking within our own industry and talking with each other, but find really creative ways to get the population at large educated and excited, and starting with children. So I think there's a lot of great potential there.
Thanks, Nancy.
Yeah, well put, Nancy. I'll just add to that is, what we have seen is the word regenerative, see, I can't even say it myself, is still in its infancy, because I think people misinterpret it as environmentally friendly, eco-friendly, things of that nature. But it, as we all know, that's not really the full picture. So it really does start with getting the consumer and the public, especially with these younger generations that are coming into the world, getting them, as you said, Nancy, educated and excited.
Thank you, GT. All right, so you're out there building products, incorporating next level principles that have quite a vast array of principles behind them. Any thoughts on price premium? I know, Amit, you framed it as, hey, we don't need to just think about charging more. We need to think about the whole system. Perhaps we have lower input costs. Do any of you believe we're at a time where something that is labeled as regenerative can or should fetch a price premium?
Well, I think that, what GT and Nancy said is really true, that the public, first of all, most of them don't know what regenerative is, may not be able to pronounce it. The people who I have talked to who have heard of it roll their eyes and they say, I just can't handle another certification. And that's coming from the consumer. Like, I know plenty of brands who are like, I can't handle another certification, but from the consumer standpoint. So I think from that perspective, it would be hard to argue that you can build a brand by charging more for regenerative. You might be able to, but if most people don't know what it is, you can't really charge a premium for it. So regenerative, to me, when people ask me, oh, are Zego products certified regenerative? I'm like, well, no, but we're trying our hardest to support that movement by buying from the right farms, by buying the right products, buying domestic, buying organic, doing all this testing that we're doing. Like, we're working so hard. And so I do worry that the regenerative certification could come along that would sort of wash over all that effort. As long as you just get the certification, then you're good. But there's so much more. There's always so much more. We're all trying to be better all the time. Like, that's the whole key to this movement. We're all trying to get better. So if we define best, it's a stopping point. And like Amit said, there's so much more than just one aspect to this movement, right? There's a lot, and that's really hard to put into one certification. And then you can kind of become like B Corp, and we're B Corp. I love B Corp, but it's so weighty. The certification is so weighty. We still only have 3,000 companies in the world who are certified. So yes, it's movement. Is it a rapidly moving movement that's going to take over the world? Not yet, but we don't have time with food. We got to move faster than that. We got 5-10 years. We got to do it. So we can sit around and argue about regenerative and how we design that logo and what it means and all that. And in the meantime, we've lost all the time we should have been doing moving forward. So I don't want the regenerative discussion to distract from the actual progress, I guess is what I'm saying.
Also, just to add to that, I think as we are getting older, the younger are called Gen Z or something. I think we should just have regeneration. We are the regeneration, you understand? So that we don't feel old anymore. So there is Gen Z, Gen Y, we are the regeneration. And I think that group, the generation, because in fashion, that's what I say to them. They can't pronounce it. So to get them to pronounce this, that's what we came up with. They're like, guys, we are not 40, 50, or 20. We are just regeneration. We're going to classify ourselves as values moving forward, And I think that's where you can build this network and see what people are willing to pay. In fashion, definitely, education alone is so, they don't understand it yet. So you can't charge anything more for something they don't understand.
I absolutely love that. That is,
we are the regeneration.
I'll be part of that generation.
Yeah. Nobody can call us millennials or anything else anymore. I'm tired of that.
I'd like to offer a slightly different perspective or answer to this question also. I think talking about price premiums without talking about subsidies to mega GMO monocrops is kind of a lost point, because right now we have so many taxpayer dollars that are going to subsidize these completely disastrous industrial agricultural farming systems. And then companies that are having to pay a lot of financial upfront costs to become certified and maintain certified organic. And it should be the other way around. We should be incentivizing farmers for farming in regenerative models through subsidies and through financial incentives, and we should be financially penalizing the farming models that are just destroying our planet. So I think, there's so many, we need to hit this problem at every single level with every single skill set in every single type of sector that we can. And policy, I think, is a major component of this conversation.
Excellent point, Nancy. And these subsidies and the leadership of our government has created the monocrops that we're describing, and the destruction of the soil biome, and then the consumption of these foods has destroyed the gut biomes of our cows and ourselves. Just overconsumption of simple carbohydrates, things that grow like crazy but are nutritionally worthless. I love your suggestion. The table should be turned there instead of being subsidized. How about they do the subsidizing? So you all have been sending questions toward our panelists, and a question for the organizer here. How many minutes do we have to go over our audience questions?
We have 15 minutes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to open those up now.
Tracy, if you don't mind me jumping in while you're looking, I'm really curious, coming after the earlier panel, how are you all determining what attributes are the most important attributes for your customers? And also, what channels are you feeling that are the best channels for your brand?
Panel, anyone would
Yeah, I can do that. So when Zego started, we were really very focused on allergy and gluten-free in that space. And as I got into the industry, I was, because I'm an advocate, I was looking around for what do I not know about what's going on in food that is not nourishing people the way it should be. And that's when I discovered all the issues around toxins and how there isn't any transparency for brands, consumers, or even suppliers, sometimes the middlemen, on how much toxic residue is in those foods. So the way we built out, once we decided to add on and really become a purity focused brand and purity verified, not just for allergens, but for all these other toxins, was we looked to where there were known toxicity problems. So we can't do the educating, we can't be the journalist and the detective, is what I've found. We don't have enough money for that. So when EWG and Consumer Labs come out with a report about oats and how they have a lot of glyphosate in them, and they didn't even go into paraquat, which is arguably, it's just a whole other awful thing that they use to induce Parkinson's in rats, but it's in oats, used on oats. We decided to find oats that were clean. So we found a partner that works with 7 farms in the US that not only test for paraquat, they sign contracts. They will not use paraquat. They will not use glyphosate, even on their adjacent farms that are conventional. We had a report that came out about toxicity, lead, cadmium, arsenic, and other pesticides in organic vegan protein powders. We had a protein powder that we knew was safe because we've been testing it for years for our bars. We launched it as a product. We want people to, again, have the solution in their hands so they can have peace of mind and not worry. And then also on every package, we tell them, contact other brands and ask them to purity verify the same way we do. So we're asking them to not only take their personal solution, but to then carry that to be an advocate across the board for other brands as well. So we're very deliberate about how we build out our product lines in that way.
So Colleen, your company most definitely is food forward around what you're calling clean. So free of these synthetic inputs that are dangerous. One of the audience question, it sort of is attacking this, how do we how do we swallow the ocean here? You know, we're talking about climate and soil. We're talking about what the outcome is for the food, the treatment of human beings. Do any of you see, and Colleen, I know where Zego stands on this. Do any of you see any kind of messaging hierarchy amongst these important benefits that regenerative has to promise the world? Or do we need to swallow the ocean to really lay claim to regenerative?
Well, I think it's health, taste, and humanity in food. That's the hierarchy, I think. And in fashion, it's rational bias, then there is emotional bias, then there is cultural bias. And that's pretty much how you build your call outs on the label. That's just, I think health comes first, like Zego is all about saying, if you eat this, this will happen to you kind of thing, you know. And then taste, of course, and then humanity.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the hierarchy. Yeah.
Who else has a point of view on this? Thank you, Amit. GT, any thoughts?
Yeah. Yes, I'd love to add. So to build on what Amit just said, is I think it really is finding a very clever and creative way to make the consumer a stakeholder. And I think the best way to do that is really deliver a story with a message that says, this is why this is important, because this is how it affects you. So I know that I have certain friendships that they're unfortunately not super conscientious about the planet and being regenerative or anything like that. But when you frame things in, hey, if this doesn't stop, these things will occur, and that thing that you love will no longer exist. And so you have to make it personal, because that really, in my mind, is the best way to incentivize people and really capture their attention and their personal interest.
Thank you. Anything else to add here, Nancy?
I added in the chat, I agree wholeheartedly that making any marketing is most effective when it's personal, because people are making choices for themselves and for their families is super key, especially, you know, with the mom, you know, being one of the main shoppers, demographically speaking. So we've also found, you know, just in some Dr. Bronners research, that leading with the product experience arguably is a higher priority for customers making purchasing decisions, even more so than health. You know, I think we can see just in what our friends and family might choose to consume, that, you know, sometimes people are still going for those potato chips, even if they're organic, because it's, you know, it's something that makes us feel good. But yeah, otherwise I agree with what everyone else has said here so far.
Okay, thank you. One of the audience questions was around an acronym that I'm not familiar with called LCAs. So if someone who knows that definition could help me out, that would be great. And the question is, does the panel view LCAs as an effective tool to communicate regenerative practices? Anybody able to help me out there?
LCA stands for life cycle analysis.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, and has anyone performed an analysis on a product or a practice inside of your company and attempted to take that out to the world?
Well, in fashion, you have to look at the life cycle. You know, where does your product end up? You know, because a lot of fashion ends up in garbage or in the ocean as threads or just as is. You know, and so we, by using biodegradable fiber and all of that, we try to show them that, hey, we'll decompose happily in 20, 30 years and kind of contribute to the ecosystem, versus polyester or nylon. That's going to go on for 300 years or so and just keep filling up the landfills. So we have done that kind of, I guess, life cycle analysis, but honey doesn't go bad, so I don't know.
Anyone else inside of the company performed an analysis on either packaging or product, or even inside kind of deeper into the supply chain?
I mean, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, we certainly have, and Colleen, I'll turn it over to you in a second because my answer will be short, but yeah, I think it's a daily practice. And I think what is the underlining theme here is that no one of us can single-handedly change this. It's all of us together. And that point carries through even the people, not only who we sell to, of course, the consumer has the most powerful decision maker, which is their dollar, but it's also the people that we work with. So at GTs, it's an ongoing conversation. Like it's not lost on me that we use a plastic cap, which makes me sick to my stomach, but we can't develop whether it's a biodegradable cap or a plant cap without our vendors who make that cap to support us in that initiative. So it really is this ongoing conversation of what can we control and how are we doing there, as well as what can we not control and how do we incentivize or partner with these external parties, namely vendors, to, again, achieve a greater result. But again, candidly, it never stops. It really is a daily practice.
I agree. You know, there's the Japanese principle of Kaizen, continuous improvement. This is very much a journey. It's very admirable that you're willing to criticize one aspect of your own brand and be on the journey, you know, to be very publicly on the journey. And you know, if we can put somebody on the moon, why cannot all of our plastic be ocean degradable and soon? So the technology is most definitely there. Does anyone have any closing thoughts they'd like to add to the conversation of something important that you'd like to share that hasn't been prompted yet by a question?
I think, you know, for us, really, when we talk about how complicated these systems are and what do you prioritize, right? You asked that question, what's the most important thing to think about first? When things start to get really, really complicated, when we try to define them too narrowly, usually transparency is the answer. So that's the way that we're headed. And that's the way I think this movement has to move forward, because it's too complex. Otherwise, like I said, we'll be spending years trying to figure out what does this certification mean? How much is it going to cost? How are we going to get people certified? And it takes years to get your first 50 people certified. Like this, certifications are a long time coming, right? As far as actually making change. Transparency, however, at the consumer level could really move things rapidly. And I think about the way, and I know people probably have a problem with this, but how Whole Foods does their ratings of animal products. And they'll say different things. You can look and you can say like, oh, as a consumer, I'm only going to eat meat that's a 5-star. Or I don't really care about this, and you can ignore it. But at least you have the information there, right? They're presenting you the information. And that's what is the answer, in my opinion, is if we're basing it on metrics and we're giving information and people have transparency so they can actually choose what they want to eat, that's how we're going to get to where we want to go in the rapidity that we need to do it.
Thanks for that. Any other closing thoughts?
Yeah, this is a personal perspective, and I believe based on the work or the individuals that I have the privilege of working with at Dr. Bronners and also in my personal life, would be in alignment with this, which is, the challenges that we see ourselves faced with today, in my personal opinion, is coming from this myth of separation, that we are somehow separate from our environment and therefore can exact control over that environment to extract resources for ourselves. And we're seeing those practices in industrial scale, whether that's agriculture, timber, development, mining, technology, all of these things, that is slowly and now with exponentially greater speed eroding our planet to have created this problem that we're here to discuss today. So I would like to offer that if we can somehow, as a global community, come back into connection with one another, connection with the earth, then the solutions we're discussing today will be so much more impactful and long lasting because we have come back into realizing we are in relationship with one another, and that cycle of death and birth can continue forward into the future. That's my hope.
Thanks, Nancy. Amit or GT, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'll build on what Nancy just said. Is I think, to create that connectivity, it would be ideal if we can little by little demystify this regenerative conversation. And in many ways, it's, even if we developed, which is somewhat low barrier, almost like just a registry of brands, vendors, packaging manufacturers, whatever. That, and again, to Colleen's point, they don't have to be a 5-star to be on the registry. They just have to be moving in that direction of the 5-star. So brands like mine and others, again, we sometimes feel very alone when we are embarking on this regenerative conversation, because currently there's not, unlike organic, there's not really a clear path. So I think the quicker and better we can demystify and really lay pave that path, if you will, I think we'll start to see more buy-in from companies and ultimately the consumer.
Fantastic.
I think if we join that regeneration movement, so we just started, where we don't get old. The first 100 to join will get vegan leather made from GT's kombucha. Okay? I think we should start a contest like that, man. Your SCOBY, and we'll get our designers from Paris to design it, and it'll be a badass leather outfit.
Love it.
Yeah, and it can have bottoms missing in some cases if that's what's needed, to make it exciting. All right.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much. Thanks for the creative collaboration and sharing all of your heartfelt thoughts and philosophies, everybody. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you
For including us.